And we got a great panel to finish up tonight. So this one is entitled, It's Time to Go Shopping. So I'll just introduce our panelists, and we'll do it like we've done with two of the others tonight. I will begin asking questions, then we'll open it up to both the floor and those folks that are online. On my far left is Wendy Acheson. She's the VP and Registrar at BC Housing. She has 20 years of experience in licensing and the regulation of professionals, as well as legal matters, government, housing, and consumer protection. She is responsible for administering the Homeowner Protection Act, which is responsible for licensing residential builders, and oversees the home warranty program in British Columbia. She's led a lot of important initiatives to improve residential construction, including some recent changes that have been introduced over the past couple of years to increase the licensing standards for builders of new homes. Next to Wendy is Mr. Condominium, Tony Gioventu. He's the Executive Director of the Condominium Homeowners Association. Has more than 200,000 members, comprising strata corporations, owners, and business members who serve the strata industry. Tony really is one of those go-to people for anyone in managing strata corporations, and I can tell you that government uses him quite a bit as it looks to make amendments to its Strata Act and regulations. So it's really great to have Tony with us tonight. Jill Oudill, President of the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver. Jill has been a realtor since 1992. She currently works with Caldwell Banker Westburn Realty in Burnaby. She became Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver Director in 2012 while serving as the chair of the association's Burnaby New West Tri-Cities area, a title she held until 2014. Jill serves on numerous committees. She was chair of the board's governance and HR committees and served on its professional standards task force. She's an advocate for professionalism in real estate and recently spearheaded efforts to organize a series of fundraisers to support wildfires in British Columbia. Great to have you, Jill. And our fourth panelist is Brad Ricketts, Energy Solution Manager for FortisBC. He's the Solutions Manager for new residential and commercial construction markets at Fortis. His focus is helping builders and developers find the right thermal solutions for their products and to create great awareness of the benefits of natural gas, including comfort, efficiency, lifestyle, and affordability. Tonight, Brad will review your energy options for reducing operational costs of home ownership, comparing natural gas and electricity. So I'm going to start with you, Jill, and let's go to right to the beginning. How does a buyer without industry contacts find a realtor who is the right fit for them?
Thank you for asking. There's many ways that you can find a realtor to work with, especially as a first-time buyer. One of the best ways is if you talk to your friends, your family, getting a referral of someone that is trusted is one of the best ways. So if that is a possibility, that's certainly one way to look for a realtor. You can make them at open houses. Often you will find them online if you're looking. Buyers often are snooping now, snooping on the internet, and you can also certainly find them that way. I have met lots of people through open houses. The great thing about that is that you can tell if you feel comfortable with them, and I think that's key in someone that you want to work with.
Great. After you've found a realtor, what are some of the next steps in looking for that home?
Well, once you've found a realtor, all realtors do work differently. We are self-employed. I like to sit down with the person that's looking at buying, do some research with them and some learning about what really means a lot to them. And then from there, there's many steps to go forward, including, of course, getting pre-qualified for a mortgage. That's one of the first things. Realtors most often have brokers that they know and trust. And if you like the realtor you're working with, chances are you will fit with their broker as well, or your bank. The best thing you can do is make sure that you're qualified and that you know what you actually can purchase.
Great. Do you want to comment on what are typical realtor fees, and when you're working with another realtor in the sale of a property?
Sorry, if you're working in the sale of a property?
Yeah, sale of a property when the seller may have a...
So you're not talking about it being a buyer?
Buyer and a seller.
The buyer and a seller.
Yeah.
There are no standard fees whatsoever. Realtors, again, are self-employed. They can charge whatever they want. Many realtors do not have and associate fees with a buyer, although some do have buyer's agency contracts that they enter into. So it's best to really just discuss all the details with any realtor that you choose to work with.
Great. Maybe I'll turn to you, Tony, and maybe get your thoughts on buying into new or used condos, and maybe even start at a strata lifestyle for folks that haven't lived in a strata before.
Well, strata lifestyle is probably for most people who move in just a really great way to be able to own a home, live in a safe, secure community, and have a great investment. But it comes with responsibilities for every owner, for their tenants, the occupants, as well as a strata corporation. So, when you live in a strata, you are a collective group of owners that share the building, all its amenities, all of its assets, all the facilities like a swimming pool and parking garages and storage lockers. And then more importantly, you have to remember you're often living in an apartment style building, so you're going to be living as close neighbors. So you will have noises and you'll have disruptions in your building and activities that take place. So it's not the same as having a detached house, but these so many benefits really are out there for you. You're contracting out services like waste disposal and snow shoveling and gardening and all of the other services that collectively you can afford as a community, and it makes your lifestyle a lot easier. It's also in many ways, depending on location, a more affordable measure of housing. So, it comes with a balance of we're living in a home, think of it as a traditional home, but it comes with a measure of balance of behavior as well. So, strata corporations are governed in BC by the Strata Property Act, but more importantly, the regular use of your strata lots day to day is governed through the bylaws of the strata, which are pretty simple. How you behave, what you basically do in your strata, and most of them are based around simple laws of respect. Things like nuisance. What can I do in my strata lot that's reasonable, that isn't going to cause a nuisance to my neighbors, and how does that work with my neighbors? How do we deal with things like children running around, or musical instruments where they practice, or dogs and cats, or noise, or somebody's shift working and they want to do their laundry at 3 o'clock in the morning, and those types of things. Normal lifestyle things are where we temper our behavior a little bit, and depending on the type of building, it could have quite an impact. So, living in a strata means we're going to collectively use and enjoy the building. The other side of that, though, living in a strata means we also collectively share everybody else's liabilities. So if there's a flood on the 5th floor, gravity is probably going to determine it's going to affect all the floors down below it as well. And if there is a problem in the building, we're all collectively going to be responsible to pay for those problems. So, it's a balance of being able to live collectively in a more compact environment with a more affordable standard, but at the same time gives us a great opportunity to maximize all the benefits that we get out of living. I don't think of strata living as any different than living in a single detached house, living in a townhouse, or anywhere else. It's just your lifestyle will be different as you live in a condo versus a different type of building. The other thing in British Columbia is almost everything that we have is strata titled. So there are as many strata titled units in the province as any other type of housing. So when you oftentimes look at detached houses in neighborhoods and think, well, this is a neighborhood of detached homes, and it often isn't. They may actually be strata titled as bare land stratas, where they all collectively own and share that land. Townhouse complexes are the same thing. They're all stratas, duplexes and fourplexes, or even in brand new high rises. Everything you're looking at will be strata titled because we share the use of the property. So we are responsible for our strata lot. We share the cost for all the common property. And I think it's an excellent alternative for a lifestyle for many home buyers. Whether you're a single person or a family, look closely at what you're buying. Look closely at what the bylaws of each of these communities allows you to do. And families are discovering that living in condos is a great way to raise a family because it puts them so close to transit and amenities and education and resources at the same time. So, it's a balance of lifestyle when you live into a condo.
We've heard from our past panelists about buying into a brand new building. What are some of the things that buyers, and this could be to Jill or to Tony, what are some of the things that a buyer needs to consider when they're considering a used condo? What are some of the steps and some of the things that they should look out for?
I'll take a shot first. So in existing buildings, so there are existing buildings that are pre-2010 and post-2010. And I'll give you a little differentiation, because if you're an investor, a building that was constructed from January 1st, 2010 onward is going to have an implication for you. Buildings that were built and filed January 1st, 2010 onwards almost always have exemptions from rental bylaws. So if you're an investor looking for a rental unit, these will be the types of buildings you'll be attracted to because there are no rental restriction bylaws. Buildings built before 2010, look closely at the bylaws. It's a chance that the strata may have adopted bylaws or may still adopt bylaws that could limit or prohibit the number of rentals that are there. What you want to look at existing buildings for starters is the bylaws first. Look closely. Do they permit rentals? Are there age restrictions? Are there conditions on pets? Are there conditions on noise or use of property or these types of things? When you've done that, look at the age of the building, the minutes of the strata meetings, and look at the financial records. How old is this building? When is the next time they're anticipating replacing a roof? When have they done the upgrade to the decks and the balconies? How old are the elevators? Strata corporations, for the most part, commission depreciation reports. Get a copy of the depreciation report, because it'll give you a good projection for the next 30 years of the major components on the building, when they're anticipated to be repaired and what those projected costs are. The financial report of the strata is also important. A strata corporation of 100 units that only has $50,000 in the contingency fund might not be a bad health card. They might have just done some major repairs, or they may have never been saving, in which case those major expenses that are coming up on the horizon are going to be major costs for you. And now that we have other dispute mechanisms in the province, like the Civil Resolution Tribunal, you'll find that there are fewer and fewer disputes within strata corporations because it's easier to resolve them quickly. But look for indications of ongoing disputes within the minutes of the meetings. You may find you could be moving into a strata that has quite a lot of controversy and a number of problems. Ask questions. And of course, the other thing with strata corporations, and when you're working with realtors on any purchase product, anything that you ask a question of, make sure you get it in writing in response. You need to confirm documentation that yes, this is or is not correct. And we see a lot of confusion in that with things like parking spaces and storage lockers. Someone just assumes because the seller says, my unit has parking space 15, 16, that might not necessarily be true. You need to get the information verified and documented by the strata corporation so that the source of information is reliable. That's the important thing with existing buildings. And it just makes your purchase that much easier. If you have a dispute after the fact, it's much easier to resolve the dispute.
Jill, comments on that?
Yeah, well said. I mean, certainly you've covered a lot of it. Just a couple of additional thoughts there. When you do work with a realtor, they can certainly help you analyze which are the good buildings that they are aware of in neighborhoods that they work, where they have seen documents. And again, that doesn't preclude you, and certainly you would do all of what Tony just said. It is very standard now to have documents from strata companies, which is great. It's changed over the years, certainly from when I started. To have it in writing, the Form B certificate is one of the items that you will get when you put in an offer on a property, which confirms exactly what he was saying, which is parking spot numbers, and what type of maintenance fees, what that actually includes and doesn't include. So it really helps you have that double check in writing from the management companies that are now responsible for providing that information when ordered by their realtor. Other things that realtors will certainly look at for you, which you wouldn't really be able to analyze or think of yourself, is whether a property at certain ages has been rain screened or not. And that certainly affects values where realtors can analyze for you. If it hasn't, what are the risks for you, especially a new or a first-time buyer, that could really affect your purchase price, and it could affect you in assessments down the road. Some rain screening has been done to properties, some has had full, some will only be a wall, and if it doesn't have a certificate of completion, it also can affect your financing.
Great. Maybe I'll turn
I was going to say, the most important thing, though, and Jill and I would agree on this, your realtor or someone's going to give you 300 or 400 pages of documents. You actually have to read these documents, right?
I agree.
That's the problem, is everyone gets loads of documents and they don't review them. You actually have to read the documents to understand what you're buying.
Maybe I'll turn to Wendy now. Wendy, when considering the purchase of a home, what are the benefits of buying a new home versus a resale product with respect to home warranty?
Well, certainly, of course, if a home is new, or even if it's up to 10 years old, it actually will have home warranty insurance on it. And that means that if there's defects in the construction of your home, you'll be able to make a claim to your builder and your warranty insurance provider to have those defects fixed. Now, there are limits on being able to make a claim. There is 1 year. If within the first year, you can get sort of the normal little fixes, anything from problems in your flooring to nicks in the wall, loose doorknobs, that sort of thing. Pretty well anything that might be defective in the home you could claim in the first year. And then you've got 2-year coverage for your plumbing, heating, and ventilation. Then 5 years on the building envelope, so that's your windows, doors, balconies, roofs, and 10 years on the structural. So that's going to be a benefit to you to have that coverage for a newer home. And that's what you won't have if you buy an older home. But having said that, if you're buying a brand new home, you're pretty well going to have that policy given to you. It's really important if you're buying a resale home that is within that 10-year period that you make sure that the owner that you purchase it from gets that policy for you so that you know what your coverage is and when those deadlines expire.
Maybe talk about the new home registry that's on the BC Housing website. Folks can access that.
Yes, it's a great resource on our website, bchousing.org. And you can go into the new home registry, type in the address that you're looking at to purchase, and it will actually tell you whether the home is covered by home warranty insurance, because there are some exclusions. Homes built by owner builders may not have home warranty insurance, and whether it might be an older warranty. It also tell you who your builder is and who the home warranty insurance provider is for that home. So it's a great resource if you're looking for a home to tell you exactly what kind of coverage you've got on that.
Thanks, Wendy. And maybe just as a final question, Wendy, we have different types of property within a strata unit. Maybe you can talk about the different types of warranty that apply to a strata building?
Yes, that's right. So the 1-year coverage will apply to your actual unit. And for the 2-year coverage, that could be either common property, so that was, again, the plumbing and heating and ventilation, or to your unit specifically. So you'll actually get a policy if you buy a unit in a strata property for your particular unit, and you can make claims against that. Now, for common property, so general common property for the strata gets 15 months coverage, and also for the building envelope and the structure, that's typically going to be your strata council that would make a claim if a defect came up. So if you notice that your window's leaking or your balcony's leaking, let your strata council know, and they would be able to make a claim within those 5 and 10-year periods.
Great. I'm going to turn to Brad now. Brad, what should homeowners be looking for when searching for a new home with respect to things like ongoing costs related to energy?
Great question, Shane. Good evening, everybody. I'd just like to see a show of hands. How many of you out here tonight are thinking of buying a new home within the next 6 months? Okay, how about the next year? A few more. Okay, great. There are a number of things that people should be looking for, and obviously you've done your homework, you've got your mortgage, you've secured your financing. Now the next thing is to work through the moving in stage and then determining what kind of costs you're going to experience once you move into a new dwelling. One of the biggest factors that people overlook is their cost of their utility bills. 76% of your home utility bills are made up of space and water heating only. Then when you start factoring in things like televisions and computers and whatever else you might want to throw into the mix, that adds extra dollars, of course, to your utility bills. So as the natural gas provider for the province, we are recommending the fact that you do your homework and determine which will be your least cost fuel for heating, for both your space and water heating. And as it stands right now, natural gas is basically 1/3 the cost of electricity. We see a lot of new townhouses. We see pretty much every single family home built in the Lower Mainland now includes natural gas, space and water heating. More and more townhouses in Greater Vancouver now are moving towards natural gas fired heating. And one of the reasons they're doing this is simply it makes it more affordable for the homeowners. That's one of the roles I fill at Fortis with working with the development community to help them provide you as home buyers the opportunity to live affordably within your new home. Take a look at how the unit is heated. If you're looking at a single family home, chances are you'll be looking towards some sort of forced air heating system, which is often fired by natural gas. Some of the more luxurious homes have radiant in-floor heating that uses natural gas as its main source of heat. Townhouses also. We're seeing more and more townhouses now move towards forced air heating and away from electric baseboards simply from a cost standpoint. We have a great online tool on our FortisBC website. If you go to www.fortisbc.com, up in the top right-hand corner, there's a little search bar. Look for the energy calculator. Now, it's difficult for me to sit here and say how much it's going to cost you to live there because I have no idea what your lifestyle is going to be. So this is where the energy calculator really plays well, and the fact that you can go in there and suggest what kind of lifestyle, how many showers you're looking at during the day, how many people are living in the house, what sort of appliances you're looking at, and you can compare one to the other, and it will physically tell you how much money you can save or actually pay extra depending on the heat source of the building. So do your homework, educate yourself on what is included in the home, and then determine whether or not you could actually afford to live there. One great example, one of my coworkers moved into a new project, and he moved in April. So he basically moved in the shoulder months of spring, went through summer. Now this was a project that was pretty much all electric. The only gas options in the building were a gas range and a barbecue outlet. And through the summertime, his electric bills were about $70 some odd a month. Well, he got into the winter, and that $70 became almost $400, which was a pretty big shot in the arm for him to have to deal with, given the fact that he had no idea that's what his electric bills were going to be. So educate yourself, take a look at what fuel is being used to heat both your space and hot water, and determine whether or not you can live there.
Great, thank you, Brad. We'll open it up now to folks on the line and in the audience, so we'll take your comments and questions. You've got four great panelists to ask questions about warranty, condo living, getting a realtor, and cost of living. Have one there.
So, in terms for the rental restriction for anything built after 2010, the strata cannot stop you from renting it. Is that right?
That's correct. What was changed in the legislation was developers were entitled to include a rental disclosure exemption within their filing when they filed a new development. That rental disclosure exemption will have a time period on it, and it'll identify the strata lots. So it will say strata lots 1 to 157 are exempt from rental bylaws until 2099. And so it basically exempts the building itself from adopting rental bylaws. And that's buildings that were filed in the land title registry and filed in disclosure on or after January 1st, 2010.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Got a question back there?
How much does it cost for a buyer, a realtor? Is there something to pay, or is paid by the owner that is selling? And well, you said that there is not a fixed price, but is it proportional to the value of the home that is bought, or how many times you meet, or how long it takes to find the right home?
Sure, go ahead, Joe.
Well, there is no fixed fees. However, in many cases, the seller is the one that provides the fees to both the realtor that is working with the buyer as well as to the realtor that's working for them. So that is more typical, but the fees themselves are, there's no rule or standard that it has to be a specific amount. But just sit down with a realtor and they can explain it all to you and how they would work with you. Some realtors may use the buyer's agency contract, in which case there could be a fee to the buyer, but that would be up to the individual realtor. In most cases, it does end up being the seller, though, that takes care of all of that, of both sides of the fees.
Question there, and then one up there. Yeah.
I was just wondering, how does leased parking get affected? Because I know somewhere in like River District, they have leased parkings.
So parking in strata corporations, I'm assuming I'm answering this, parking in strata corporations is complicated. It starts out first with how it's designated on the strata plan. So the strata plan is the land title document that shows the boundaries of all the property, and then it identifies parking and common property and storage lockers. In most strata corporations, parking is common property. What developers do on new developments is they will assign parking. Not on a pre-sale because the building isn't constructed yet, so you don't know how many spaces or what's happening. On a pre-sale, it's just going to simply say you will be signed a parking space, perhaps. But once you've purchased, or when you're purchasing in a new building or an existing building, you will be assigned a parking. It may already be assigned by historically by the previous owner, or on a new development. And what a developer may do is they'll create a license. They're not leases, they're licenses, or a contract that gives the buyer the privilege of using that parking space for a specific period of time. You're actually not physically buying a parking space. What you're doing is you may be purchasing the right to use that space for a specific period of time. And those leases or licenses are very common throughout the industry, but they are a lease, they are a license or a contract. They're not a lease of property because no actual interest has been created in that piece of land. Because it's common property, the common property belongs to the strata corporation. So the strata can still regulate it, they can still have bylaws over it, but it would be assigned to you for your use. So that's the good part about this. The complicated side of this is those things are not registered anywhere. So if the original purchasers haven't kept copies of those original leases or contracts or licenses and passed them on to the subsequent purchasers, you may not know what they were designated or how they were designated. So in a really good way, the Strata Property Act changed in 2012 and forced strata corporations to create parking inventories and plans, where they actually have to identify how the parking is assigned to each strata lot. And then if a buyer comes along, they have to disclose that information to a buyer. So parking is more secure now when you're purchasing or selling. But yeah, it's not part of a strata lot. It's generally common property. There may be some sort of contract or license that existed. You may or may not find it. If you are buying into a new development though, and there is a parking assignment, make sure you keep that document separately, because that document will be important when you want to go along and sell your unit someday, or if you have a dispute over the use or the allocation of the parking.
We had a question there, and then we'll get to you in the second row. Yeah.
I have a question because I'm looking to buy a home in the next year or two. And recently I have a lot of friends who were telling me, because Jill, you mentioned about buyer agreement document, and a lot of friends are arguing about it. You don't have to sign this. I have realtors that are working with you if you don't have to sign this. My question is, what other risk I'm facing if I don't sign these documents? And if I move in the house in 2 to 3 months after down the road and something goes wrong with my house, is the am I the one being responsible because I didn't sign the documents? And on the other hand, Tony, you mentioned about when the realtor gave me 300 to 400 pages of document to read about a strata. Am I responsible to read all that? Because when I sign a document, they are the ones taking care of me and to point out if there's a problem in the documents.
You can answer.
Okay, so as far as the buyer's agreement, a buyer's agreement is just simply a working, the one that I was referring to actually is just, it's a document some realtors choose to use to have an agreement to work with a client. So they would, if they're going to do all the work with you and for you, that they want to make sure that both parties are committed to that relationship if they put in the time. In many cases, like I said, the buyer isn't paying any sort of fee. So that's a choice. It's 100% a choice. Never feel pressured into that. If you're not comfortable with it, you shouldn't sign it. There's many realtors that don't use any such agreement. So if that makes you more comfortable, that's the way that you should go. So that's entirely separate. I think you're getting a couple of things there maybe intertwined a little bit. As far as you said, after you had the house for a while, what are the possibilities of being in a problem if something went wrong with the house? Was that what you meant?
I'm saying if I don't sign it, what risk do I have? If something goes wrong, can I go back to the realtor and say, hey, you are the one told me that this house is fine? And then he can tell me, well, you're the one decided not to sign these documents.
Okay, so the buyer's agreement's one thing. Let's just put that aside because that you do not have to sign. That's your choice of how you choose to work with a realtor in that relationship. As far as signing the paperwork to purchase a home, you are under contract when a realtor will sit down. I often take my clients long before they purchase. I sit them down and show them the paperwork to purchase a home, so they're very comfortable with it. I like that they're not worried about all the paperwork when you actually sit down and make a choice on a house, so that all of those questions can be answered in advance. So at the time when you make a choice, it's a lot easier for you to feel comfortable because you are just thinking about the actual things about the house. Now, as far as that goes, what's important to do when you're purchasing a house is go through those things with your realtor, and they will sit down at length and discuss things like a subject to inspection. In the case of a condo, like Tony was explaining, reading the documents is very important. Some things will be more important to certain clients than to other clients. For example, pet restrictions or, a risk tolerance is also on an individual basis. I've had clients that say, no problem. I'm not worried about that. That doesn't bother me. I would rather, for example, get a great deal and I realize, the state that it's in. It's being aware and made aware of everything that you can when you purchase a home. And then eventually it is the buyer's decision whether it is to go ahead with any, transaction or not. But you just have to make sure you're well informed and feel comfortable with that.
We had a question in the second row, and then we'll go back there.
It's about the parking when she said that I brought something up. When I had bought my condo, it came with one parking spot. 2 years later, I bought another one. I thought that was registered. I have no proof other than a fax receipt. But Strata knows, and they acknowledge that's my parking spot. So if I was to sell my Strata, how do I prove that's my parking spot?
So the words "I have no proof" are a little bit of an indication that you have, something to be concerned about.
That's
right?
why I'm asking.
Exactly. And that's one of the problems that comes up with parking that's common property that ends up being put into a lease, a contract, or a license. Not all the agreements are the same. The contracts and the relationships are different. Who you purchased it from, whether it's still valid or not. We often refer people, especially purchasing additional parking at a later date, we'll often refer people to speak to their lawyer to look at that transaction to make sure it's valid, so that because you may be putting out $25,000 or $30,000 for another parking space to discover this just wasn't there, or there was a problem with that.
I have bought it from the
I don't
developer.
think you probably have that problem. I think if you have a receipt that you can confirm from the developer that there is a parking space assigned, that it existed within the purchase cycle, I think you're probably well protected. But I would try and pull up as much documentation together as you can, and confirm in writing with your strata corporation that they've acknowledged that yes, this is your assigned additional parking space that has been assigned by the developer under a license. And I think you're probably all right with respect to future sales, but it's absolutely critical you keep that documentation so that you have evidence to give the next purchaser. That's the most important part of this.
That's the scary part. I don't know if I still have it. I thought it was registered at the land titles office.
They're not registered at land titles because it's common property, and the developer cannot lease or sign a lease to common property in land titles.
Right, the developer's out of service now too.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
So we have a question back there, Don, and then we'll go.
I was just referencing to the last question in person that was asking about the lease on a car, that they bought a car, parking spot. I was wondering if there were some condos that you actually have to pay to buy a parking space. So if you pay for it, would it be on the land title?
No, you see, that's the misconception. Parking is such a hornet's nest for new buyers and for everybody. It's not really that complicated. When you're purchasing a parking space in most developments, and right across the board, it's almost the same. What you're actually purchasing is the right to use that space. You're not physically purchasing the space like a strata lot. And so there is no property that's being created. So you can't register this anywhere against a piece of property. It doesn't exist. We will probably see some changes in legislation in the future, but right now developers, for example, when people actually have parking licenses, before the first AGM, a developer can actually create an assignment that is registered in land titles that shows all of these parking spaces as designated limited common property, and it actually identifies which parking space and which space and which strata lot they're assigned to, and those cannot be unchanged by the strata corporation. So every relationship is different. Everyone is going to have a different contract or license, and you're going to have to look at them separately for every purchase. Just look closely at the purchase document. Make sure that the numbers you're assigned on the lease that you have or the license that you have coincide with the ones that you've actually been given, and make sure that your strata corporation has a copy of that document. That's the important thing. If they have a copy of the document, then they have something that they can rely upon as evidence that, yes, you were actually assigned these things. It's interesting, but out of the 5 Ps of all of the conflicts that come up in stratas, parking is almost number 1 most of the time. And it is the chronic challenge because in many buildings there is not enough parking or people want more parking.
Don, we have a question back there, right behind you, Don.
Hi, good evening. My name is Julian. I'm a realtor. Hi, Jill. I would like to add some information to your question, sir, regarding the document that you have to sign. And Jill was referring to the exclusive buyer contract. That is a loyalty agreement, but you'll have to sign a document that is working with a realtor. And that document defines your relationship with a realtor. And at the bottom of it, you'll have to initial between being a customer or a client. And those mean that if you sign as a client, your realtor owes you fiduciary duty. And in the event that you feel like your realtor didn't work for you, you can file a complaint toward the council. But if you work with a realtor as a customer, then if you feel like the realtor didn't do the right work, then it didn't owe you the fiduciary duty. It's a big difference, and it's a mandatory form to sign when you work with a realtor. So working as a client will protect you. Does that answer your question?
Do you have any comment on?
Yes, that is a good point, and that's some of the paperwork I was talking about when you sit down to actually, go through with it, as well as a realtor will show you all of the ins and outs, like you've just mentioned as well. Things are changing, actually. with the rules the government is putting into place, the superintendent of real estate is changing things. So you really need to be informed, and that's where a realtor will sit down, and I won't take up the time because it's quite extensive, but things are definitely changing as far as the ability for a realtor to represent a house as well as a buyer. That will no longer be in place. We've just had that date changed. It will change now on June 15th. So make sure you understand the changes and how a realtor will be able to represent you, or if you will be now what they will refer to on the new paperwork. If you were to go into an open house, for example, see a house you want, if you were to write with the realtor that is in the home that has it listed for sale, you would then be what they are going to call an unrepresented party, and that's how they will refer to it on the new paperwork. So there's a lot of changes coming forward with the government, so make sure that you're informed and you take the time with your realtor to understand the process.
An unrepresented person doesn't sound like a good position to be in.
Well, I think personally, obviously, I would always work with a realtor because
Right.
you can have the relationship that you are protected, and they have the due diligence and a fiduciary duty to work for you specifically. And ultimately, that's the way to make sure that you're protected.
Great, thanks, Joe. We had a question there.
Just wondering, I was reading, before I got here today, I was reading some strata docs from an older condo, like 1976 in Central Coquitlam. And I read from some AGM in 2017 that there's going to be changes in regards to depreciation reports, and they're going to be mandatory in 2018. Is that correct, or is he just lying?
No, there's no such change. Depreciation reports are not mandatory in BC if the strata has passed a vote to exempt themselves. So if the strata votes by 3/4 vote each year, they can exempt themselves from the requirement to have a depreciation report. And the reason the exemption was put into place is because we have so many duplexes and triplexes and small industrial stratas across the province that it would apply to so many buildings that may not necessarily be relevant. So the exemptions are actually put in place to give stratas the ability to step outside of that. But as a buyer, I think that if I go into a building that does not have a depreciation report and it's 25 years old, and I have no knowledge about the condition of the building or the finances, it would be a red flag for me. It would be a serious concern that there's things we don't know. And that's what a depreciation report is about. It's about telling you what you need to know to be able to make a competent decision. And whether as a condo owner, how much we need to be planning for future repairs, or as a buyer, what my risks might be if I buy into this strata. The document is an incredibly valuable document for everyone.
Jill?
If I could just add just one quick little thing. When I sit with clients and go through the documentation, the one thing is that you have to remember, and it's hard, but you never sit and read, wow, this is just, a great plumbing that we have. This is great plumbing. And now this is really great. And our windows look really good. It is only the issues that they talk about and or maintenance. That is what they're for. So you just sort of have to remind yourself that that's what the documentations include.
We got time for one more question. If there's a last one from the audience, so we'll do two. One audience and then the last one online.
Hi. My question is about the bidding war that's going on in buying a property. Is there any law that's going to put an end to this? Because this is such a big frustration for someone who has a limited budget.
Do you want to take that one, Jill? It's about bidding wars? And are you still seeing a lot of those happen in the market?
Yes. Yes, we certainly are seeing a lot of bidding wars where condos and townhomes are concerned. The sales to active on condos and townhomes is still very high. There is a lot of competition. We're facing low supply. Detached, however, if you're looking at buying an actual single-family home in a detached neighborhood, that is out now bordering into a little bit into the buyer's market territory. So we've seen that landscape change in the last few months. We do know that there's a lot of condominiums coming onto the market in many different areas in the next few years. A lot of inventory. So it just depends because, of course, we don't have the statistics to show whether those were pre-sale whether they're home buyers that have purchased the ones that are coming up into the completion phases, or if there is a lot that will be, people had the intention of maybe flipping and selling. So there will be more inventory coming on in the next while. But we are seeing a lot of multiple offers, and that's where it comes down to sitting with a realtor, figuring out the areas that you want to purchase in. Some are definitely hotter than others as far as that goes, and setting a plan forward to help you figure out how you can purchase is important.
Take the last question from online, Vanessa.
Okay, this is a question for Tony. Can an owner change the energy source to a unit in a strata? So, could they have a gas stove?
So, yeah, it's a good question. Well, technically, if they can get building permits, and if the building itself is designed with proper ventilation and you can do upgrades on buildings, that is technically possible. However, this may be a change in the utilities or structures of the building that might be affected by the bylaws of the Strata Corporation. So if they have gas in their unit available and they're wanting to have a gas stove installed, the first thing, of course, they need to find out is it even possible to legally put a gas stove in to meet the code requirements? But the second part of that is, does the Strata Corporation or do the Strata Corporation's bylaws permit those types of changes? And they may not. You might just find that the building itself is only equipped just for the provision of gas for hot water, collective use, and gas fireplaces, and doesn't have a contingency to be able to install gas stoves or gas ranges. So they're going to need to each check with their Strata Council to see if that's possible. The other thing that will happen is it will also be an increased charge or an increased cost for the utility of how much is being used for that strata lot. And when it comes to utilities for strata lots, there's no way a Strata Corporation can charge that strata lot more money. So the strata might just deny the change unto itself to be able to install that based upon that premise alone. So it's more difficult in existing buildings. Certainly if you're wanting a gas range and you're wanting more modern appliances and you're wanting better efficient appliances and you're wanting to have all of these amenities, you might be looking at a new location, a new built building, as opposed to existing buildings that are modified.
Did you have a comment on that, Brad?
Yeah, I do, as a matter of fact. We actually see this quite a bit, especially with a lot of the older townhouse projects, whereas the actual townhouse development itself has one main gas meter and everybody shares it and everybody pays a portion of their strata fees towards the gas utility. We see a number of these older projects now that are wishing to change over to be individually billed, where each unit ends up having their own individual gas meter. And it's something that we do fairly often on a conversion process. But what it takes is definitely permission, obviously, from the strata. Then they have to move towards the cities and municipalities to get permission to do it. Then, of course, there's all the quotation process for the mechanical contractors that would physically do the work. And then whether or not there's actually space available to put individual meters for every suite or every unit in the townhouse project. We also are now looking at a lot of the new condos that are being built. Developers are actually choosing to put individual gas and electric meters on condo units so that the person living in the unit is responsible for their own energy consumption. And that's a service that Fortis offers to our developers, where we will physically install individual meters for every suite. So each person in the building gets their own gas bill and their own electric bill. They may pay a small portion of their strata fee towards the common amenities in the building, like it might be a pool heater, or there might be something for hot yoga in the lobby and they've decided to put in some sort of gas-fired steam heater for the hot yoga or whatever it happens to be. The homeowners of the strata would then pay a portion of their strata fee towards that bill, but everybody else gets to pay on the individual side. So it is happening. We are seeing it on a conversion basis, and we're also seeing it on a lot of newer condos coming on stream.
Great, thanks, Brad. So please join me in thanking Wendy, Tony, Jill, and Brad. And thank you for joining us, and thanks for those online.